Good evening, garden people, and welcome back. If you're new around here, my name is Alex, and I garden in containers in southern Missouri, Zone 6B, 7A. It is nearing the end of August, and I have some finished compost here that needs to be addressed, and I have some plants that I am about to get started for fall, so this will be perfect to top my beds. So I have my compost tumbler back here and a few buckets so that we can harvest this compost and hopefully use those 5-gallon buckets to measure how much I actually get out of this compost tumbler. So let's turn around and get started. Okay guys, I grabbed a couple of different size buckets because I wasn't sure which one would fit underneath my compost tumbler. First, I'm going to give it a few spins to loosen up the compost in there so that I can get it out easier. So I have a Vivosun dual side 43-gallon compost tumbler. It has 2 doors, as you can see here, and a separation in the middle. So there is actually 2 separate sides to the compost tumbler so that you can have 2 different stages of compost going at the same time. I have had this compost tumbler, I think, for over 2 years now, and in terms of wear and tear, almost nothing. These they come in panels. This is one panel, and they not only clip together but also screw together. The screws are rusty, but that doesn't really affect the compost, so I don't mind. And only this one clip likes to pop out, but again, it doesn't affect what I'm doing. It doesn't leak out of there, doesn't get filled with compost in there. There's just a slight gap in one of the edges. And that's all. Other than that, it is in perfect condition. It's a little wobbly, but it's been a little wobbly since I got it. It's just on some metal legs. But overall, I love this thing, and it's been really easy for me to use. There was a little bit of a learning curve to figuring out the exact moisture levels and green to brown ratio that it preferred in my area with my weather, and we will talk about that in a bit. When I assembled this over 2 years ago, like I said, I did have help, and it probably took 20 minutes, but you could easily assemble it by yourself in probably maximum 45 minutes, I think, personally, but probably faster. It was really easy, just a bunch of little screws, and like I said, the panels come small, so it's just piece by piece, put it together. The instructions were easy. At the time that I purchased this, actually my mom, she purchased this for me. At the time that this was purchased, the retail value on like Amazon was over $100, I think $110. And right now on Amazon, it is roughly about $80. So it has gone down in price since I purchased it, or my mom did, but we also purchased it from a resale shop that sells like returned Amazon packages and stuff. So we actually got it for $80, the price that it is now, when it was more expensive. So we got a little bit of a deal on it, and it's done great for me. As for the compost that is currently in the bin, it has been around 4 months since I stopped adding any material to it. And maybe about a month of that, it was finished composting, and I've just left it sitting in here. So overall, after I finished putting material in there, I think it took about 12 weeks for the material to finish composting down and be usable in your garden. And like I said, depending on your weather, your climate, your area, and where you have your compost bin located, it could take longer or shorter than that. Now, I mentioned that there are 2 different sides, and so that you can have 2 different stages of compost, but I personally don't utilize that method. I fill both sides at the same time and just slowly fill it until it's as full as I want it to be before I just let it compost. I tried to do the one side adding and one side composting, found it a little bit difficult to keep the ratio of moisture to material, and the 2 sides were in 2 different stages of compost, because the more finished compost needs less moisture and doesn't produce as much moisture, whereas compost that you're adding nitrogens into consistently will produce a lot of moisture, and then that moisture will soak into the side that is more finished and cause it to take longer to finish and be too wet. So I tried that once the first time I did it, and didn't find that to be very good. So I just kind of came up with my own method. I am in no way an expert at compost or compost tumblers in any way, but I just thought I'd share with you guys how I do it, because I have and do succeed in making nice compost that my plants really love. Let me stop yapping and let's get to harvesting some of this compost. And in just a second, I will bring you guys in closer to see what it looks like in here and how the compost looks. So I have this black bucket and this purple bucket. And if the purple bucket fits under there, I'll use that because it's bigger. It does. So what I'm gonna do is slowly tilt the compost tumbler to where the compost is right here at the edge of the door, and then put the bucket underneath and use my hand or this little shovel to pull it out, and then rotate it back and forth and pour it. It's a little bit of a process, but it works. There's one bucket. Now, it is homemade compost, and it's not excessively hot composting. Like when you make a pile, the pile gets a lot hotter on the inside than this compost tumbler does. So it doesn't perfectly compost everything. This is half of an avocado seed, and that's fine. I'll legitimately just put that back into the compost tumbler with the next time, and it will eventually break down. Same with this. This is just a really dense root ball of a plant, just didn't fully break down, but a lot of it is soil anyway, and roots break down pretty quick, so I don't have a problem with these big chunks that I can just pull out, or even just plant them in my bed and they're not going to harm anything. For now, I'll put these in the black bucket. So here's our first purple bucket of compost. Let me bring you guys in now. This is what the consistency of the compost is looking like. It is a little bit chunky, but that is perfectly fine with me. That would fit probably through a 1/4 inch mesh. I don't have a sifter. I'm just going to pull out any big chunks with my hands and toss them into the other bucket. A stick is fine. It's going to compost down pretty quickly in the beds. But overall, this looks pretty good. And it smells like soil. Your compost should not smell bad. It shouldn't smell rotten or moldy or too wet. It should just kind of smell like a bagged potting soil, like an earthy smell. And to me personally, as a gardener, that earthy soil smell is delightful. I love it. So we're going to pour this into a 5-gallon bucket and start our measurement. I want it to be a fair measurement, but I don't want to pack it in too densely, you know? So I'll push it down a little, and add a little more. Make sure it is 5 gallons. That's perfect. It's a little over full, just for potential naysayers. I got another maybe third of a bucket out of this side of the compost bin. There is a little bit more in there. It's not fully empty, but I like to leave just a little bit of finished compost in each side of the bin before I start brand new, to leave some of the good bacteria and enzymes and things from the finished compost to get a head start on the new compost that I'm going to make. I'm gonna switch to the black bucket to harvest this side so that you guys can see it falling better. I put the lid on the right side so that little bit of compost stays in there. And here is what we're working with on the left side. I definitely could have filled this compost tumbler a lot more, but it just didn't happen. Sometimes things don't happen, so that's life. Let's harvest this. Here we go. Nice. A few big chunks again, like I said. This one's a root ball, so I'll break it up some, put it in the other bucket. And then I'll look for more big chunks as I pour it into the 5-gallon bucket. That 5-gallon bucket's almost full. I think we're gonna get at least 10 gallons of compost, guys. Oops. I think that's enough. I'll probably leave all of that in there to start the next batch, like I said. And we have another half-ish black bucket of compost. Another reason I like to have both sides of the compost tumbler in the same stage of compost at the same time is because my harvest would only be half this big if I was only doing one side of the compost tumbler versus two. And this is a decent amount of compost, but when you have a garden as big as mine, which isn't even enormous, it's about 45 of those containers, those big containers that you see. This is probably only going to top 5 or 6 of them, which is a good amount. That's great. I can plant in 5 or 6 of them and use them until the frost comes, and that's amazing. But in hindsight, it's not enough to cover everything. But it is a good amount and I am happy with it. All that to say, is my way of using this compost tumbler the most efficient? Probably not, but it works for me and it might work for you too. So here's how I do it. We are going to start a brand new batch of compost in the tumbler right now. So I have both sides of the compost tumbler open and I just got done gathering some materials to start this brand new fresh. Over here we have one of the containers that I grow in. And in the bottom of this is just some used potting soil, some used mulch, and then this is sun-baked, rained on, left outside for a long time cardboard. This is actually the first time I've ever used cardboard in my compost tumbler on a large scale. But I think with my method and the mixture of everything that's going to be going in here, it will be fine. Cardboard does break down pretty quickly if it's wet, so I would not recommend using only cardboard as your brown material. You should have an array of both brown and green material, preferably. You don't have to, but it is preferred. I'm going to start by adding this cardboard equally to both sides of my compost bin. And just a minute ago, you heard me refer to this as brown material. So let me tell you a little more about that. So typically, in a compost pile or bin, you have both brown and green materials. We call them that, and you can mostly assume that if it is brown or green, then it is respectively a brown or a green. Mostly, like I said. The way that I like to think of it is that the brown material produces the structure of what becomes your compost. So what you mean by brown is dry. You want it to hold up to the wet green material that you will be adding to the compost also. And the green material is what produces the gases and liquids that hold all the nutrients, and you want those nutrients to be soaked up by your brown material. I say you can mostly refer to color for that because some things that turn yellow or brown quickly don't necessarily mean that they're dry. For instance, a corn stalk, or a corn husk or a corn stalk. If you husk an ear of corn and you leave the husk on your counter for a day, it kind of turns yellow. But if you cut it, it is still full of water and nutrients and liquid. Therefore, that is a green material, even though it looks yellow or brown. The same with the stalk. The outside leaves will get really crispy and crunchy and dry, and those crunchy, dry ones are brown material. But once you cut into the middle and you get to the part that still oozes liquid and is white or green on the inside, that is not a brown material. That won't soak in any liquid. So what I typically use for brown materials is actually the same thing that I use for mulch, which is pet bedding that you buy at a store for chickens or rabbits or guinea pigs, hamsters, things like that. You can buy it from Walmart, Tractor Supply. I usually buy it from Hirsch personally because that's close to me and I can get it in a large amount. I'm sure plenty of other places, Petco, any pet store, and it works really well for mulch for me. And then, once it breaks down enough that it's starting to mix into my soil and I don't want that, I then use it as browns in my compost bin because it is so dry at this point, and so thin of a woody material that it soaks in. Even as a mulch, it's holding in water. So I know that this is a good material to soak up all those nutrients and gases and things from the greens. There are other things you can use as brown materials too, like really dry grass. If you mow your grass and then let the clippings sit in your yard for a couple of days, rake them up, and you've got brown material. I also personally have a snake tank in my house, and when I clean it out, it is coconut core and coconut husk bedding. When I clean it out, I will put their bedding into here as a brown material because it will soak up the liquid. And cocoa core and cocoa husk is actually a common material in soil anyway, so that's a great one. You could use sawdust, but that's another one of those things that I wouldn't recommend. Only sawdust for the same reason as the cardboard. It'll get really wet and soppy quickly, and that's not good for your overall compost. Honestly, you could use paper bags. The paper egg cartons, not like the styrofoam ones, the other ones that like disintegrate if they get wet. Those would be a great brown for your compost. I've seen people put rice hulls in their compost. The byproduct of selling rice is the little like seed cap basically that they come in. It's just a little papery substance that can go in here. In autumn, when the leaves fall off of the trees, you can rake them up into a pile, let them break down for a little while until they get brown and crunchy. Then those can be browns for your compost bin. There really are a lot of options for that. Wood chips. These are what I use for mulch is called wood shavings, but I mean like wood chips. You can use those if you can get them dry. If you get them fresh from a mill, like if they were just made, then they're not dry enough. You have to let them sit in a pile, let them dry out, get rid of all the moisture that comes in them so that they can soak up the moisture you're giving them. Now that all of the cardboard is in there, we're going to go ahead and put the wood shavings in there and the little bit of soil that's in this bucket as well. I think there's also a tiny bit of cardboard in the bottom of this bucket. If I lose some, that's fine. It'll break down in my yard and get mowed over. I'm not really worried about it because I will be adding to this for long enough that it'll get replaced. It's not really much of a loss. This cardboard actually has like ink and plastic on it, so I'm gonna throw that away actually. There's some like grass in here from me shoveling up the wood shavings from where they were sitting, but that's fine. Oh, little guy, I don't want you in my compost. Come here. Come here. Come here. This little guy was in my bucket. I'd prefer not to have him in my compost bin. Pretty sure that's some kind of little skink or salamander or something. I will look it up later and put it on the screen to let you know what he is. I'm just gonna let him go in the bushes over there. Bye. I guess that is my good deed for the day. Save a lizard. Alright, I'm going to pour the last little bit from this bucket into this other one. This specific container of used mulch is actually most recently been used on my potato bed. If you haven't seen my potato harvest video, I will link it down in the description. So this seems like a lot, I know. But this will break down fairly quickly and start composting fast at the beginning, especially because I leave that little bit of finished compost in there with the good bacteria and whatnot already present to speed up the process of composting. We're at the point where I don't think I need this big shovel anymore. I can use this tiny one and just and then here are the big chunks from the compost that we harvested that I told you I would put back in here and let continue to break down. Now let's put the doors back on. That is all of the brown material that I will be adding as of right now. I will have to slowly add more as this breaks down because that is not enough to fill this whole thing. Like I said, this is actually 43 gallons on the inside, so around 21 gallons per side-ish. So let's give this a good spin to mix together those brown materials. I usually do both directions a few times just to make sure it's incorporated. So this is what it is looking like inside the compost bin right now. This is that plate in the middle that I was telling you about. And if I knew at the beginning that I was going to use it all as one, then I would have left this plate out, because really you don't have to have it. I mean, maybe you do. It kind of makes it more structurally sound, I guess. But if you really wanted to, you could take out the middle plate and have it be one big compartment. But here's what we're working with everything that we put in. I have actually been saving food scraps in my kitchen for about a week now in preparation for this video and for restarting my compost bin. So let me go get that and we will talk about green materials. Okay, everybody, let's talk green materials. We already touched on this a little bit, but I wanted to make sure that if you're using this video as a how-to or a what to do or a it's wrong and I don't know how to fix it, then I want you guys to fully understand. So, like I said, the brown materials soak in what the green materials produce. When I say green, it doesn't have to be green. The browns are more likely to be brown than the greens are to be greens. Green material really just means wet, recently chopped down or recently gotten rid of. Mostly food scraps, but a handful of other items as well. So as I put these green materials into my compost bin, I will give you some examples of what those green materials can be and why you want a diversity in your green materials when you're composting. And I personally, like I said, add a lot of browns and then slowly add in the greens because I don't have 20 gallons of green material from my kitchen to add to my compost bin all at one time. So it takes me a while to fill it up, but that's fine. So here are my greens that came from in the house. Over here we've got some broccoli stems and leaves from broccoli that I bought at the store. We've got a banana that I tried to eat yesterday, and it tasted fermented, so I decided not to finish eating it. And over here we've got some spinach, some lettuce, some more broccoli greens, some onion skins, and all of these are great examples of green materials. All of these will produce gases and liquids as they break down, which will be perfect for these browns to soak up. Now, why you want a diversity in greens, for example, is this banana is high in potassium. That's pretty general knowledge. So this, when it breaks down, is going to add some portion of potassium to your compost. Whereas this broccoli is higher in vitamins than it is potassium. I won't try to speculate. I can put on the screen exactly what vitamins they're high in. It's going to add vitamins, maybe K, and this is going to add potassium. Broccoli is also high in fiber, and onions and lettuce are high in water content. So all of that will just be really, really good as different materials that hold different nutrients for the compost to then provide for your plants. Right now, since I have two, I have more bananas in the house, so I'll produce more banana peels and such. I'm just going to pour this one in this side and pour this one in this side. I also have quite a few plants over in the garden that need to be chopped down soon. Some plants you don't necessarily want to put into your compost bin. For example, where I live here in southern Missouri, it gets really humid in the summer, so a lot of my tomatoes have disease on them, and I don't want to put diseased plants into my compost bin because that disease can spread if it doesn't get hot enough to kill it off. And I know that in my compost bin it is most likely not going to get hot enough to kill off those kinds of diseases that live in soil. But I do have plants over there like zucchini plants, a loofah vine, some zinnias that are dying, and those would be great green material as long as they're not diseased. Also, grass clippings can be green material as well as brown. So I told you if you want them to be a brown material, mow your lawn, let the grass clippings sit there a few days, and when they turn brown and dry, put them in your compost bin to be a brown. But if you want them to be a green and produce nutrients and water for your compost bin, rake them up immediately after you get done clipping the grass, mowing the grass, and put them in your compost bin to release their moisture in there. I did say there were other sources of green material that weren't necessarily plants, and there are. Another thing that you want from green materials is nitrogen. Plants love nitrogen, and there is a lot of nitrogen in a lot of different manures. So people who keep chickens will often clean out their chicken pen and put their droppings into the compost bin. And those will heat up the compost more than plants will because they produce a lot of methane gas, which produces heat and will make your compost finish faster. I don't have chickens, but my mom does, so there's a good chance maybe I could get some of that. She also has goats, which produce things, which I could gather and put in the compost bin. So there are just a lot of options for both browns and greens that you could find basically anywhere. So for this compost, all we have left to do is tumble the bin a little bit and then slowly add in more greens and more browns as necessary. But there are a few more things that I wanted to tell you if you are, again, trying to use this video to help you with your compost bin. First of all is the hydration. I've been telling you that the green materials leak liquid and gases, and they do, but depending on where you live or where you have your compost bin located or the weather that you get, that might not be enough moisture. If you can reach in there and it is totally dry to the touch, you need to add water. If you are reaching in there and it feels moist and smells bad and rotten and stagnant, you need to add more browns. Hydration is a really, really big part of whether or not your compost is going to compost. I personally have maybe one time added water to my compost bin, and it was, again, in the very first time that I ever tried to make compost in it. And obviously I have learned a lot since then. So that's the only time I've ever done it, and I've never had to add water. But I live in southern Missouri, where it is 70% humidity on an average day. So there's quite literally water in my air. So with how humid it is here, how much it rains, and the liquid that comes out of my green materials, I've just never had to add any water. But you should take into consideration where you live, how warm it is, how humid it is, if there's a lot of wind, how often you tumble. It's kind of a process of learning what your compost tumbler is going to do for you where you are. So now heat and cold, which kind of have, again, to do with the weather. If you're in a place where it gets 100 degrees outside on average during the month of August like I do, your compost is going to get a lot hotter and finish a lot faster and require a little bit more attention from you to be rotating it on a regular basis because it's composting faster. Now, when it gets cold outside, if you're trying to compost closer to the winter or the fall, you need to keep in mind that it is colder outside. It might be even freezing outside, and the compost in this bin that's lifted off the ground and totally surrounded by air will not get as hot as your typical large compost pile. The compost bin, I have videos on my channel, maybe I'll put one up somewhere. It has before frozen solid to where I couldn't even rotate it because it was so frozen and stuck on one side of the compost bin. So keep that in mind when you're starting your compost, and think about when you want to start your compost so that that isn't a problem for you. If you live in a more mild area where it doesn't freeze in the winter and stays kind of warm, then maybe you can use it for longer. Another thing I want to talk about is bugs. Being lifted off the ground like this makes it a lot less likely that bugs are going to try and get in there, as well as if you have enough green and brown material to where it's getting hot in there, the bugs kind of don't want to be in there. There are a few kinds of bugs, maybe like roly-polies and a few things like that, that will get in there. I've seen ants in there before, but never enough that it's been like a big problem. And once the compost really starts to break down, they tend to escort themselves out, and I've never had an issue with too many bugs in there. Speaking of bugs, I forgot to mention that there are quite a few items that I do not put in my compost, but if you had a larger compost pile, you could, but I just don't, for the exact reason of bugs and animals. I do not put eggs in my compost, raw eggs or egg shells. The egg shells is more for me because I often garden without any gloves on, and I don't love picking up broken eggshells. It doesn't feel so great. Meat, I don't put meat in there because it doesn't break down very quickly. It could potentially smell bad even if you are composting at the right temperature, and the smell, regardless of if you think it smells bad, will attract animals, flies, stray dogs, possums, raccoons. We have a lot of wildlife around here, and I just don't think it'd be a smart thing to even try that, so I don't. When it comes to tumbling the compost bin, once you have started your new set of compost, I tumble mine. First of all, every time I add green material, I don't just let the green material sit on top, I mix it in so that it has as much surface area touching the brown material as possible, so that no matter where that green material starts to break down, there is something there to soak up what it is leaving behind. If I'm not adding material actively, I rotate it 1 to 3 times a week. Again, you need to keep your eye on the weather. If it's been raining a lot, you need to turn it more. Your compost tumbler can become anaerobic, where there's not enough air in there if you don't tumble it enough. There are air holes all over it. These, all around the whole sides, these have holes in them, and some of these little inlets also have holes in them, as well as when you open the door, air will get in there. But air doesn't need to just get in, it needs to rotate around and touch everything, so that's why you're tumbling it. So I usually rotate it after a rain as well, and when I do rotate it, I try to rotate it maybe for about 2 minutes total, and I'll do half of that 2 minutes going one direction and half of that 2 minutes going the other direction, just so I can get the best possible mix of everything that's in there. I also check the contents of the compost bin before and after every tumble. So if I go to put green material in there, I open it and I check what it's looking like before I tumble it, before I add green material. Then I add my green material, tumble it, and check it again with my hand, because sometimes it can seem dry on the top, but underneath it's not very dry and it just needs a tumble. Or the opposite, maybe the top seems really wet because it just rained and rainwater dripped into the top, but the bottom is really dry. Again, maybe it just needs a tumble. Maybe you need water, maybe you don't. I'm not trying to make it seem like it's harder than it is, because I find it fairly easy to take care of it. Basically, if I'm like, I haven't touched my compost tumbler in a bit, then I go tumble it and check how it's doing, and it's been doing pretty good for me. So here is the current state of what the compost tumbler looks like. I can see a little bit of the green material, but it is mostly brown in here, and that's fine because I just started it. So there is going to be a little bit of an off balance of materials for a little while, but it will start to add up, and I will keep you guys along for that journey. So here are my 3 buckets of finished compost, which soon, maybe even tonight or tomorrow morning, will be going into my garden. I use this as, sometimes I mix it in a little, but oftentimes I just use it as a top dressing, where I'll take off all the mulch that's on my containers, rough up the soil a little bit that's in the container already, and then just add this to the top and plant directly in this. And as you water your containers, or garden beds, wherever you grow, the nutrients will seep through the compost and into your soil, and then taken up by your plant's roots and put into whatever food or flowers you happen to be growing. Alright everyone, that is all that I have for this compost tumbler video. If you need any more explanation on something or have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. I'm always happy to help. If you want to go and watch any of my other videos, I'll put them on the screen here. And by the way, I have a live stream scheduled where I'm going to be doing an inventory of my seed collection and ordering seeds that I need to replace for next season / this fall, and probably looking at garlic varieties for what I'm going to be growing over winter this year. So if you're interested in that, you'll find it on my channel and hit the little notification bell. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one.